This time on Classic Motorcycle A to Z, the letters J and K. So I'm going to be spending the next couple of months on a major adventure. This doesn't mean we're going to leave you without content though. We're putting together a series of videos which we're calling Classic Motorcycle A to Z. So basically we're going to run through the alphabet and give some history and information about various classic motorcycle companies as we go. This time it's the turn of the letters J and K. Jawa is a motorcycle and moped manufacturer established in Prague in what would have been Czechoslovakia in 1929, when František Janíček acquired the Wanderer motorcycle brand, at least its division based in Czechoslovakia that is. He would christen the machines Jawa, a portmanteau of his name and the Wanderer name, although to anybody in Britain of course they're just called Jawas. His experience lay in the armament industry and he didn't have a great deal of experience with motorcycles, although there's no doubt that his knowledge of production techniques was transferable. For his first machines he chose the Twingle two-stroke layout. This was very popular in Austria and Germany at the time, and would remain in use by both the Austrian Puch Company and Jawa in the early post-war years. Although right from the start there would be big four-strokes too, with a 500cc single-cylinder unit in the lineup from 1929 onwards. However, the worldwide depression of the early 30s would soon affect Jawa too, and they would introduce a 175 two-stroke in 1932, which would soon be Jawa's best seller, with 27,000 units sold during its lifetime, 3 times that of the 500 single. After the Second World War, Jawa would introduce a 350 and 250 parallel twin two-stroke engine, which was effectively a development of the earlier 175 single. There was also a 500cc overhead cam parallel twin in the range, but it was the two-strokes that became their best known machine and their most exported product, with the 1 millionth Jawa having left the factory by 1964. The 60s would also see the development of their potent speedway engines, a range of machines with fully automatic transmission, and in 1966 an updated version of the parallel twin called the California, or the Type 363, the descendants of which remain in production today. James Motorcycles started life as a bicycle manufacturer in Great Street, Birmingham in 1897, and while today the company is best known for its lightweights, which were produced post-World War II with Villiers two-stroke engines, but at the beginning it was very different. The first machine was built in 1903 and featured a 2.5 horsepower Minerva engine, which is essentially clipped to one of their bicycle frames. However, by 1908 the company was producing complete machines incorporating their own engine designs. This machine would be slowly developed and by 1911 incorporated, as an option at least, a metal clutch within the hub. By 1913, with the First World War only months away, James boasted an ever-expanding range of machines, from two-strokes and also incorporating four-strokes with side valve, including this 4.5 horsepower model with its side valve single-cylinder engine with a 2-speed gearbox in unit. It seemed strange to modernise, but unit construction was often distrusted by the bike-buying public at the time, and as such often didn't enjoy the sales of more conventional transmission systems, despite its obvious advantages. 1913 would also see the introduction of the first James V-twin. In this case it was a 500cc side valver, and in both sporting overhead valve and side valve form, 500cc V-twin would be a mainstay of James's production for many years, a machine often affectionately called the Jimmy. After the end of World War I, the company would suffer a misfortune when the factory was burned down in 1922, and this would greatly delay the start of production. But despite this, the 1920s would be a successful period for James as a motorcycle company, and the overhead valve 500cc V-twins produced from 1928 onwards would be very popular indeed. So much so that they would abandon production of their own two-stroke engines, instead bringing in Villiers units of 150, 172 and 196ccs. But as the 30s wore on, production gradually ceased of James's own engines, and eventually the range would be exclusively lightweight two-strokes powered by Villiers engines. After the Second World War in 1946, James would return, but with just a 2-model range. One was an autocycle and the other was a 125 based on a wartime model, the ML. But the range would begin to increase as Villiers expanded their choice of two-stroke engines. In 1951 the company would be absorbed into the Associated Motorcycles Group, and in the latter part of the 50s would be persuaded to move away from Villiers engines and make use of the new Piatti-designed AMC two-strokes. But unfortunately these machines would prove to be problematic due to a combination of factors. AMC were not used to assembling two-strokes, and the overall design of the engine was less than perfect also. And indeed the whole episode would mortally wound AMC and Villiers both. Kawasaki Industries is a business that is involved in lots of different branches of industry, including aviation, shipbuilding, and of course motorcycles. But it was the aircraft division that manufactured the first motorcycle engine in 1949, a single-cylinder 148cc overhead valve unit rated at just 3.9 horsepower. In the 60s, the company would develop a reputation for its potent two-strokes, although the company's first large capacity machine was in fact a license-built version of BSA's A7, the design of which Kawasaki recreate today in their W series. In 1969, Kawasaki would introduce the H1 Mach 3. This was a 3-cylinder two-stroke of 500cc. This was very much a machine intended for the US market, so suspension was quite soft and the bars quite high. This did not make for a fantastic handling machine. Add in a flexi frame and an oh so peaky engine, and you can see why the bike had such a dodgy reputation as a bit of a widowmaker. Of course, like most of these things, the reputation is somewhat overblown, but the fact is the bike was certainly not the most nimble on the market. And as for the 750 that was placed at the top, this does have the same reputation, but in reality it's a little bit more user friendly. But of course Kawasaki, like everyone else, would move towards 4-strokes with the introduction of the Z1. The reasons for this are manifold. There was the emission regulations then coming in, the fuel crisis, and the fact that actually not everybody likes 2-strokes. And so the Z1 would arrive and brush Honda's CB750 aside, in the power stakes at least. And of course it wasn't just about the horsepower. The Quacker enjoyed fresh modern styling, and the engine had a reputation for being bulletproof, and would spawn a whole new generation of 4-stroke 4s from Kawasaki, but also from the likes of Suzuki too, who would basically copy the design for their GS750. And while the Z1 was indeed many things, both powerful and imposing, few people in Europe would have described it as nimble, a fact not helped by those American-style high bars. And so Kawasaki would introduce the Z650, a machine more in tune with European tastes, a more natural riding position, a smaller, more compact machine, and yet with a smaller engine, only 650, that gave the same performance as most other companies' 750s. Perhaps Kawasaki's best all-round package of the era. Into the early 80s, and things started to get seriously big for Kawasaki, as bikes like the GP-Z1100 started to take Kawasaki down the rabbit hole of a very powerful engine, but with a chassis that was perhaps a generation behind. And this thinking would take Kawasaki to the Z1300 with 6 cylinders, water cooling, tremendous power, but also a tremendous amount of weight. But Kawasaki would take major lessons from the period and transfer what they'd learned to the all-new GP-Z900, a machine which, apart from its turn in the original Top Gun, is perhaps a little forgotten these days, given that it was the last generation of machines before the race replica became fashionable. But the GP-Z was the best all-round machine of the period. Great handling, lots of power, and the definitive early 80s classic. KTM is an Austrian motorcycle manufacturer whose history traces all the way back to 1934, when 2 Austrians set up a car repair business in Mattinghofen in Austria. But they would soon find that there was a very high demand for repair work on DKW motorcycles, and this would become an increasingly important part of the business in the pre-war era. Post-war they found that the demand for repair work had fallen off sharply, and so in 1951 they would introduce their own motorcycle, the R100, a lightweight machine built at the rate of around 3 per day, which used a proprietary Rotax engine. In 1953, Ernst Kronreif became a major shareholder in the company, and so Kronreif, Trunkenpolz and Mattighofen would use their initials to christen the company KTM. 1954 would see the introduction of the R125 Tourist, followed by the Grand Tourist, and then the Mirabelle scooter in 1955. In competition they would win the Austrian 125 road racing title in 1954, and in 1956 made their first appearance at the International 6-day trial. 57 would see their first Sports 125, the Trophy, as well as their first moped. Throughout the 60s the company would continue to expand, and had 400 employees by 1971, and a range of motorcycles that totalled 40 different models. However, into the 1980s, and KTM would suffer major turnarounds, with the market for scooters and small motorcycles declining rapidly in Europe. and so in 1991 management of KTM was transferred to a consortium of creditor banks, who would split the company into 4 parts, including the sport motorcycle division, which still continues today, with the now signature orange colour scheme being first adopted in 1996. Hope you enjoyed the video and found it interesting. Look out, there will be more videos in the series coming soon. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.